Where else better to go to have a look at, this whole farming issue than, of course, Will Atkinson, who, again, not a farmer, has never had anything to do with farming, never had anything to do with agricultural policy or creation of agricultural policy, but then neither have I. But then again, all I've had to do is look at the facts. What has been going on here? Let me remind you, the fact is, last year alone, 56% of agricultural land was bought by millionaires that currently remains unfarmed. We covered very recently Victoria Atkinson and the plight uh, of a very wealthy out landowner who had 6 tenant farms and was worried that they would have to sell their land. Well, hold on, why do they have to sell the land when they're farming his land, which is what he is going to have to sell? A reminder, of course, that this original tax exemption on, of course, farming land was brought in by Margaret Thatcher in 1985, I think it was. This led to a massive explosion in cost of farming land, which has led to, again, tax advice for these multimillionaires who have gone to buy agricultural land so that they can avoid tax dodging. Jeremy Clarkson even admits that's why he bought that farm, because he could get out of paying inheritance tax. And here's the real kicker. If you are a farmer and, oh no, you suddenly find you have to pay inheritance tax, they're not even paying the full inheritance tax. They only have to pay 20% over the course of 10 years. And the reality is, once again, we are talking about 0.25%. So you are talking less than a quarter of 1%, less than 1%, are actually going to have to actually pay that of farmers. You are talking such a minuscule amount. Such a minuscule amount on this. Is this going to be the wedge issue that we're about to see Will Atkinson that will make the Tory grand comeback a reality? I don't think this is going to go well over with the British public, who are basically being told, yeah, these guys, these very rich, wealthy landowners don't want to pay inheritance tax. How do you think, well, that's actually going over in the polls at the moment when people are told the reality, of course, of this? Yeah, doesn't go over that well. People sort of have changed their minds on that quite quickly. So before we go diving, of course, into Will's fantastic piece where he's suggesting that Kemi Badenoch, for some ungodly reason, should make Jeremy Clarkson a lord. Please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page, the one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee, the YouTube thank you button. And of course, as always, there is the Pony Club as well. You can join it. And of course, if you are a member of the Patreon as well, you will gain access to the Pony Club videos as well. Hang on, this will be going out on Tuesday, but yeah, I forgot to say it last time. Pony Club video, go check it out, guys. And of course, if you want to join the Pony Club, you will gain access to all the other Pony Club videos that we've made, not only just on here, but if you join the Patreon as well, you'll gain access to them as well. So as always, thank you very much to everyone who does help and support the channel that way. Like I say, even if you do, just click the like and share button. So let's crack on then into this nonsense that Will is spouting again. And oh boy, are there some people actually picking this apart in the comments. It's again, it shows you the bizarreness of this in Conservative Home. There are a couple of comments I really want to highlight in this. So let's get on to this. So walking through Westminster yesterday, I picked my way through the Sea of Balor, and I became very aware that I was in the presence of destiny. Really? You think this is a point of destiny? Okay. The cause of farmers is just. again, it links back to Victoria's Atkinson article, again, complaining about, rich landowners having to pay inheritance tax. Oh, no. At the exact point we should be worrying about our food security in a volatile world, a Labour cabinet of myopic metropolitanists has now pushed a policy uniquely designed to put a very successful mid-sized farming business at risk. No, it wouldn't put it at risk at all. Not only that, if you want to have better supply lines, then I'm sorry, Will, but you need to be advocating rejoining the EU. Most of our food we do import from the EU. Maybe sort of removing all those trade barriers we've put up because of Brexit might be a better idea. Just a thought there, Will. But and of course, trying to pluck the Treasury's choice now of low-hanging fruit, they made the choice so stupid that even we avoided it for 14 years. No, you decided not to do it for 14 years because a lot of your own fellow MPs are landowners and do this exact same tactic for tax dodging. Keir Starmer can obviously trot out claims about how few farmers will be affected all he likes. And there are so few farmers are actually going to be affected by this. It's a valid talking point, and this should be brought up every single time. Just go, what do you mean? It's so inaccurate. You're literally talking less than 1% of farmers are going to have to pay this or even be involved in this. But with DEFRA, of course, claiming that Rachel Reid figures are now wildly inaccurate, the potential for far more estates now to be broken up because of their desire to prop up the NHS for a day is very high. And when, of course, John McTaggart suggests that small farmers should go the way of mines, he said the quiet bit out loud. Here's the thing. What this will do is this will now mean that there's more agricultural land for sale. This will allow more people to get into farming. This was apparently something that the Tories cared about only just a few years ago, about wanting to get new people into farming. Like, I don't know if people remember that, but this was a whole thing where they wanted to try and get new entrants into farming. They were talking about doing subsidies and loans, sort of like the first time buyers thing that they did for people wanting to get on the property ladder. They want to do a very similar thing for new farm entrants. Guess what? They didn't do it. Why? Because the argument came back from them and their very rich landowner supporters was, we don't want people actually buying up farmland. We do not want competition for this farmland. Anyway, every single Labour MP elected for a rural seat can now consider it lost. Again, there's no reality. There's no thing that is actually going to sort of be that way. And of course, why? Of course, again, even if these rural seats are so upset at Labour, why are they going to go back to you guys? Because you guys were incredibly incompetent, took the UK out of Brexit, which has massively damaged UK farming. You got rid of CAP and replaced it with ELEMs, which every single farmer hates. And you also did untold damage to UK farming through those trade deals you signed with Australia and New Zealand. So why on earth are you going to suddenly go back to being a Conservative if you changed your vote to Labour and you were a farmer? More likely, you are probably either going to go to Lib Dems, potentially, maybe Reform, maybe even the Greens. Who knows? So, so back to this. So not only because, of course, they promised farmers one thing and have done the opposite, but because they have now heavily handed targeted a group with a particular public sympathy, has now confirmed every cliche about them being more interested in appeasing the public sector lifers than protecting the countryside they consider faintly racist. Bear in mind, what these people are protesting about is they have to pay, or maybe the possibility, a very slim possibility, they might have to pay inheritance tax, and it's not even the full inheritance tax. They have to pay 20% of that inheritance tax. They're not even paying full inheritance tax. Then they get to pay that back over the course of 10 years. I'm sorry, this is not going to play well amongst the rest of the British public. Um, I'm sorry, that's not how it seems to be playing out either. Kemi Badenoch has, of course, had plenty of time to decide how they should actually plug those piffling holes now produced by reversing the policy. Again, plug the piffling holes by reversing this policy. You are talking about billions of pounds. So if Kemi Badenoch comes back into power at the next general election and does this policy, where is she going to tax to sort of fill this hole to pay for the NHS services? What's her farming policy going to be? Has she actually got a policy on farming? I don't think so. Anyway, she might, of course, follow the Fred DeFoss's reliably exit advice and, of course, rework our incoherent system of agricultural levies and subsidies while scrapping the inheritance tax altogether. Quite frankly, she has time to think, as Labour have now punched themselves in the face. No, they really haven't. Getting rid of inheritance tax altogether will leave a massive hole in the HMRC coffers. How are you going to replace all that tax you gain from inheritance tax? Not going to work. You made that system of agricultural levies and subsidies even worse. Why do we think you're going to improve it any better? And of course, remember, these were brought in by Michael Gove, who, remember, Kemi Badenoch was like the apprentice of. Is anyone going to sort of remind them of that? But he continues. As Tom McTaggart, of course, wrote for Unheard this morning, and of course you remember Unheard, the even weirder sister than Conservative Home, as he wrote for Unheard this morning, one could, of course, not miss the, quote, weightiest movement among those rowdy-faced sons and the solid of the Wellington-wearing lovelies. I felt the same cackle of an extraordinary crackle that I felt watching Donald Trump's re-election, and the same tingle that worked its way down my neck watching Sunderland declare for leave in 2016. Silo was at work. What? What? No, I don't think this is the wedge issue you think it's going to be. Because if you ask the British public that's saying these people, well, mainly these multimillionaires, are getting out of paying their tax and basically saying, well, they only actually have to pay 20% of the inheritance tax that, only 4% of people in the UK actually have to pay. Who do you think they are going to come down on the side of? Remember, the Conservatives are currently accusing Labour of making this a class issue. And the reality is, they're the ones making this a class issue because they're asking people to side with hereditary landowners and people with huge land assets. Who do you think they're going to come down on the side of? Anyway, by common sense consensus, the crown, of course, now lies in the gutter. Really? If anyone picks this up, it will not be the Conservatives. Yesterday, SW1 was graced, if he so chose, by the man who could pick it up. Jeremy Clarkson was a very popular, comfortable life. Rich, a beautiful farm in Oxfordshire, an extraordinarily popular TV show. He recently became a granddad. He has no duty to go into politics, but if he did, he could bury Labour and leave us trailing in his dust. Don't think he's going to join the Conservatives because he isn't again a big fan of the Tories. So sow the wind and reap the whirlwind. Generally think that if Jeremy Clarkson enters politics now, writes James Kangaroom, it could be a moment. Britain's Trump, but far more English and less authoritarian. Really? Less authoritarian? Considering when he was asked how you find more money to pay for the NHS if you were to sort of scrap this tax. He basically said, "Oh, just walk into Whitehall and anyone who can't explain their job to you gets fired. Oh, yeah, completely, yeah. Anyway, he has, of course, The Reach, a massive TV show, part of the nation's now mental furniture. Paging Dominic Cummings, the startup party needs wellies, not wizards. The idea of Prime Minister Clarkson is not a new one. At the height of his Top Gear popularity, it was a slogan very familiar on TV shirts stretched across the bellies of pub bars, petrol heads, and even sensitive peep show souls. He was a public schoolboy bore, popular because he wrote up the Gardenisters and provoked his BBC conferences. Yet, of course, his reconciliation, his reincarnation, of course, as British farming's talisman, he has not only been made Clarkson's Farms the most entertaining thing on television, but has also now blessed himself with a far more wide-ranging appeal. Has he? I think Clarkson is still pretty much a divisive figure, but there you go. Countless times he has, quote, left the left-leaning acquaintances lent in to say that they can't usually stand Clarkson, but love him now, as he's now swapped petrol for pigs. Older and a calmer Clarkson is now cuddly. Yeah, I don't think so. Because he's still the same old boorish guy he ever was. He hasn't really changed, quite frankly. One poll, of course, has him trailing the money-saving superstar Martin Lewis in the public's estimation. As Robert Calvo has pointed out, the Dutch farmer citizen movement stormed to success in regional elections last year and then helped Geert Wilders into power. Again, are you talking about helping Farage into power? That would be our equivalent to the Netherlands there, Will. I don't think you realize that. Farming could, of course, be a springboard into now other popular grievances, NHS waiting lists, immigration insanity, and abysmal politicians. So wait, okay, if you're going to use this springboard, remember this tax being used to help to pay to fund the NHS to help reduce those waiting lists. How does that then feed into that NHS waiting list? How then does this feed into the immigration insanity where most of those farmers you are complaining about would love to go and hire all that cheap immigrant labor from abroad rather than here in the UK? Thanks very much for all that reliance on that cheap labor that you like to proclaim against, but all of a sudden have nothing to say about it right now. And of course, quote, abysmal politicians. Well, what about your own abysmal politicians? Because almost every single person in Kemi Badenoch's shadow cabinet was part of the most abysmal time of the last government at some way, point, or form. Talented, they are not. And of course, anyone who has watched Clarkson try to reverse his Lamborghini tractor will know that the chance of him applying himself to the mind-numbing slog of draining the Whitehall swamp is very ludicrous. But look at Trump. For a fraction of what Elon Musk spent, a movement could be built around Clarkson as a figurehead. Tory Leninism will find its Caleb Coopers. What? Tory Leninism? Geez, I've said this before that Will seems to be going through like this midlife Tory crisis, not only just with this, but he's having his own, Brexit fundamental crisis as well, where he's talked about the problem that Brexit has created in the past and not even acknowledging that Brexit, is the cause. When he's written about Brexit, he can't seem to admit about certain problems it has caused in this country. When you look at how he has written about the past glories of the Tory government, he hasn't exactly covered them in glory, merely, following the party line about how fantastic supposedly this, policy is. But when, the British public, who again, you're meant to be sort of, appealing to, didn't find them very popular, which then, of course, led him to despair about the impending loss that they were about to suffer, and then realize, oops, you lost. And I've said before, these people have not done any soul searching. They have not looked back. They have not looked at themselves in the mirror to even examine why they have lost, why they lost so badly. all Will can do in here is not even think about what future farming policy for any potential future Tory government should be. Instead, oh no, they should get Clarkson into the Tory party because reasons. Fascinating window, again, as I've said many times, Conservative Home is into the current state of the UK Conservative Party. So, even as one hopes the political pendulum will swing back in our direction, one has to be very aware that the next election will prove to be the best opportunity in decades for a third party to break through the Tory-Labour duopoly. Reform would at least hope to be the beneficiaries, but they are at least limited by the very small talent pool and the dead weight of Nigel Farage's popularity ceiling. I like Nigel's popularity ceiling. While that is certainly true, I do think he's sort of right in that popularity ceiling. Why is it reform that's going to break through? I've said this before many, many times. The biggest threat isn't from reform, it's from the Lib Dems. If there is a party to break through, it is going to be the Lib Dems, not reform. So existential to, of course, Badenoch's leadership is proving that the Conservative Party deserves a right to exist, to make good on its mistakes. Hasn't done that so far. To deliver in the national renewal. Hasn't provided any policies of how it is going to do that. We continually promise and now continually fumble. You have done for 14 years. Why are people going to remember, and be voting you back in at the next election? Clarkson did more for the countryside in one series than Countryfile did in 30 years. What could he do for us? He has now a greater reach than any CCHQ video. Probably not be very kind to you because, remember, a big part of his series was complaining at that current government, which, guess what, was you guys. Do you think he's really going to be kind to you guys? Did you actually watch Clarkson's farm, Will? I don't think you did. So, whatever Labour, of course, chooses to do, the wider anger surrounding the farmer protest will fade. Even if it does linger at least long in the memories of rural voters, again, it won't. I think this will just die down very quickly because it's a load of rich, wealthy landowners complaining about the fact they have to pay tax. That is the reality of these protests. And the British public have just gone, pay your taxes. Clarkson, of course, will go back to Chitting Norton to make Clarkson's farm. And, of course, another cause celeb will emerge with champions to profile the bandwagons for Badenoch to jump on. Everything, of course, will continue to get worse in the expected fashion. But in the short term, as they say, they will remain very sensible. Biding ourselves to a farming cause and a chief spokesperson seems no bad idea. Boris Johnson stuck Ian Botham in the House of Lords. Yeah, that wasn't regarded as a very bad appointment to the House of Lords, was it? Well, no, that was regarded as a weird pick. That was bad politics. Why would you elect someone who, again, really good at cricket, but what credentials does that have to say to put him in the House of Lords to discuss, public policy on online, health, defense, etc. Yeah. Badenoch should now, of course, take a very similar berth to Clarkson. Even if he does refuse to take the Tory whip or not, Chipping Norton is taken. But Lord Clarkson of Diddley Squat has a nice ring to it. That was an incredibly bad article to say we should make Clarkson a lord. And to say here that this could be a springboard into other popular grievances. Well, remember, you were in charge for 14 years. You are largely responsible, if not massively responsible, for those NHS waiting lists. The immigration insanity, you are ultimately more responsible. When the guy, the new czar not the new czar, I suppose you call him, the new guy who's in charge of the border patrol force, literally said it himself in his first meeting. It's the first time all these agencies have actually met together to coordinate. They have never done that once. It was the first time they have ever done that. The abysmal politicians. Well, that counts for you guys as well. You've had abysmal politicians and policies the last 14 years. Why are people just suddenly going to return to you? You know, people have long memories. You guys were hoping they'd forget all about COVID, but no, they didn't. They still have it. And of course, the COVID inquiry still going for another, I think, 2 years, I believe it is. So yeah, good luck once again how that reminds people about all that. Anyway, I do want to go into some of these comments because some people are really calling out when someone says here, are we really going to be honest and actually admit that this agri land exemption largely benefited rich people buying farms to avoid inheritance tax? It may suit us to bash Labour, but it is really about avoiding tax. Yeah, again, on Conservative Home, people have said that. And there are some good ones, other ones around here. Let me find them. Yeah, this is another good one. I don't believe this is the wedge issue Conservatives are actually looking for. Well, I do think the government should actually be engaging with the NUF to make this at least a more nuanced. The Conservatives has said, of course, this is a class issue, which sounds like they believe that this is now an attack on old money. This is obviously not very compelling for much of the electorate, except those who wish to doff the cap, as well as the hurrah Henrys now set to benefit. We are told that these are the last days that farmers are amongst last couple of days that now farmers are amongst the poorest in society, and in some cases struggling to feed themselves. So perhaps the immediate need is, of course, to get some living cash to them. Whether this is actually through subsidies or not, but better is, of course, to now focus on a tax cut decades in the future that for now continuing for real farmers is now easy to at least plan for. However, the speed of this proposal is disproportionate, both for farmers and plentiful tax dodgers. Um, Someone else sort of brings up here, I don't quite understand Mr. Atkinson means by the dead weight of Nigel Farage's popularity ceiling. There may well be an opinion poll or two that has to come to the conclusion that Farage's appeal is somewhat limited. But we all know what opinion polls are worth, don't we? Reform is, of course, gobbling up Labour support in constituencies that have long been traditionally Labour. Our own President's government demonstrates in a brief 4 months that it is now increasingly a voter repellent party. And of course, the first opportunity that Labour get will be ejected from power. For those who cannot bring themselves to vote Tory reform will, of course, then be the natural choice. This means we should be seeing a lot more of Mr. Farage, who has already broken through quite a few ceilings in recent years. You know, bear in mind, this guy, again, shows he doesn't get it. What about the Liberal Dems? You know, it's the Lib Dems who are their real danger here to them at the next potential general election. The Lib Dems, you know, Tim Farron was at that, you know, protest as well. If I were Ed Davey, I would have said to him, stay away from it. I would have said to him, stay clearly away from that policy. Um, what the Lib Dems really need to do, if I were the Lib Dems, I would be putting out what their policy actually is. Like, okay, if this is a policy, how are they actually going to fix the problems of the countryside? What are they going to do? Haven't seen that yet. They might have put it out. If I have, I haven't seen it. But they should be putting out what their version of how they are going to sort of help the countryside should be. Not to say that, you know, this is a family farm tax. Because the reality is that first point put it, and this is basically an attack on old money, which is what the Conservatives are currently claiming. It doesn't look good for them to be joining in on that. And then there are some others. Where are they? Yeah. Atkinson's plea for a celebrity endorsement for the party. I seem to remember someone trying that in the recent US election and it didn't work out too well. Um, let's see. There's going to be some more others here somewhere. Yeah. Here it is. The self-confessed tax dodger Clarkson is a hero? Question mark. What is this party becoming? Badenoch was now only jumping on this wagon because she had absolutely no other policies. Which again is true. She has announced no policy for this. Um, let's see. Yeah, this is I do like this. You get when you read some of these comments, you get to recognize a lot of the people who do comment regularly. And this is someone who does comment regularly, more often negatively than positively about these articles, which again would be fascinating to talk to this person in real life. Um, but they say on this, the whole point of Clarkson Farms is in relation to British farming, is that Jeremy Clarkson is not even remotely typical of a farmer. He manages because he's funded by Amazon fees. But the challenges that, of course, he meets are very typical to farming, which begs the question: how on earth most actually farmers do hang in there? The answer is that they're more likely to be from farming families dedicated to the work. The series have been at least important to these farming communities because it has brought now a greater understanding of the challenges they face to a wider audience. Again, I agree. That has been something that Clarkson's Farm has done. It did bring those issues to a wider audience, especially as I said, there is this time frame that it was filmed in. Um, you know, post, during, and post pandemic as well. It does certainly highlight a very problematic period for British farming during that time. Um, and like I say, it is good. It did highlight those issues. So, in an era, of course, where wars are happening, becoming more dependent on international trade for food is a huge mistake. Um, Again, international trade, we are already in that state. But this is something that people seem to think that we can't quote feed ourselves. We could do so, but that means we would actually, have to take all that agricultural farmland that has been bought by millionaires that is basically sitting there untouched. Um, you know, are conservatives going to do that? Are they going to endorse such a thing of taking all that farmland? I don't see that. Um, to which someone else did say, "Well, we Remainers did try and warn you." um, And then this is actually interesting. So this was an opportunity for Conservative Home to actually commission an informed article on the subject from an expert like Marie Batters. But she's now in the Lords, who is now a very fierce critic of our inability to come up with a coherent agricultural policy for the UK post Brexit. Instead, we get more gibberish from young Will. When will we ever learn that there is no substitute for a thoroughly thought out policy followed by sound administration? Putting celebrities like Ian Boehm, much as once admired him as a cricketer, is just empty gesture politics, which is so characteristic of the idle buffoon who was responsible for it. Again, you could have actually got someone like Marie Batters, again, former head of the National Farmers Union, who really went to town on the Tory party several times for their not having any good agriculture policy. You could engage with her, get her to come up with an agriculture policy. After all, heavily involved in farming, agriculture herself. Why not get her to do that? Oh, that's right, because Kemi Badenoch does not have any policies. She is terrified of actually talking about policy. Atkinson writes poor articles, but Badenoch may huff and puff, but she's not going to last until the next general election. Clarkson is a self-centered maverick, and he will only ever look after himself. Um, Harold Wilson, again, notice him commenting more regularly. I noticed that Mr. Fromage was there, dressed as a farmer. I also note that he happily managed to mingle with a bunch of complete strangers, and he's yet too not frightened to meet his constituencies, of course, not once. I do also further note that Diane Abbott, a subject of continual death threats from the far right, managed to meet her own constituencies on a regular basis. But then again, she actually cares about them. Poor old Mr. Clarkson has just trashed now his own brand, were he to actually know it. A man, of course, is judged by the company he keeps. I expect the free speech absolutionists to cancel this comment before the morning is out. Yeah. Honestly, as you can see here, yeah, not going down too well because the Tories are trying to spin this as oh, this is Labour engaging in class warfare. Well, they haven't brought anything about that up, to be honest. What you are seeing from the Tories play out here is this is an attack on old money. You know, they are going after all this land. This is a family farm tax. Again, it's not even affecting farms in this way in nature. Lots of people have come out and said it in the past. If these farmers have multiple ways they can do this, and should they actually be subjected to an inheritance tax, they are only going to actually have to pay 20% of the inheritance tax. They aren't even paying full inheritance tax. Remember, only 4% of people actually pay inheritance tax. you know, Mountains out of molehills. This is not going to be the wedge issue that Conservatives, I think, want it to be. Um, if anything, I think the Lib Dems will need to really sort of make more issue of this, especially if they are going to go after that blue wall even more. They need to be coming out and saying, well, if we were in power or we were in coalition, this is what we would do to help British farming and British farmers. Currently, I haven't seen that yet. Bear in mind, I did say I would at least be keeping some eye on what the Liberal Democrats are doing, but having Tim Farron part of that protest maybe doesn't send the best image, especially with this is coming across to the public as these people don't want to pay tax, which again, when you look at the amount of assets they're sat on, yeah, doesn't look that shall we say very good. So as always, let me know what you think down below, and of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.